Imagine being able to trace your entire existence, every ancestor, every migration, every moment in history, through a single thread of DNA. This isn't science fiction. It's the reality hidden inside every human being. And when scientists followed this genetic trail, it led them to one undeniable truth: Africa is the birthplace of all modern humans. For centuries, historians and archaeologists pieced together fragments of our past through fossils and ancient artifacts. But DNA changed everything. It gave us a way to travel back in time, beyond written records, beyond civilizations, to the very first humans who walked the earth. And what it revealed was astonishing. The oldest fossils of anatomically modern humans, people who looked just like us, were found in Africa. Sites like Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, dating back 300,000 years, and Homo in Ethiopia, from 200,000 years ago, confirmed that Africa was the starting point of human history. But fossils are just bones. DNA, on the other hand, is a living record, a biological time capsule that connects the past to the present. Deep within our cells, there's a special type of DNA that is only passed down from mother to child, mitochondrial DNA. When scientists traced this DNA back through thousands of generations, they made a groundbreaking discovery. Every single human alive today shares a common maternal ancestor who lived in Africa around 200,000 years ago. They call her mitochondrial Eve, not because she was the only woman alive at the time, but because her lineage is the one that survived in all modern humans. And it's not just maternal DNA that confirms our African origins. The Y chromosome, passed from father to son, tells a similar story. Every paternal lineage today leads back to a single African ancestor, proving that no matter where you are in the world, your roots begin in Africa. But if all humans came from Africa, why do we look so different today? The answer lies in migration and adaptation. Around 70,000 years ago, small groups of humans began leaving Africa, spreading across the world. As they settled in different environments, from icy tundras to tropical jungles, their bodies adapted over thousands of years. Skin tones changed, facial features adjusted, and new genetic traits developed, but the fundamental DNA remained the same. Even more fascinating is that Africans today have the highest genetic diversity in the world. This means that two random people from Africa are likely to be more genetically different from each other than a European and an Asian are from one another. This diversity is proof that Africa has been home to humans far longer than any other place on Earth. So, what does this mean for us today? It means that all humans are connected, beyond race, beyond nationality, beyond borders. Our differences are just adaptations, but our origins are the same. Beneath the surface, we are all part of one extended human family. Your DNA is a story that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years. And every time you look in the mirror, remember that your journey began in Africa, with the very first humans who walked the earth. Imagine standing in a vast desert, surrounded by nothing but wind and sand. Now picture that same land lush, green, and filled with life, because that's exactly what Africa once was. Long before the towering pyramids or ancient civilizations, Africa was home to thriving human populations who lived, hunted, and migrated across its ever-changing landscapes. But how do we know this? The answer is hidden in our DNA. For decades, scientists believed human migration was a simple, one-way journey. People evolved in Africa and then spread across the world. But DNA tells a much more complex and fascinating story. As it turns out, migration wasn't a straight path. It was a constant movement, shaped by climate shifts, survival, and adaptation. One of the biggest forces behind early human movement was the Sahara Desert, a natural barrier that separated North Africa from the rest of the continent. But here's the surprising part. The Sahara wasn't always a desert. Every few thousand years, due to shifts in Earth's orbit, the region would turn into a green paradise, filled with lakes, rivers, and forests. During these humid periods, humans traveled freely across the Sahara, connecting different parts of Africa and beyond. Then, as the climate changed and the land dried up, they were forced to move, sparking new migrations that would shape the genetic landscape of the entire world. One of the earliest groups to leave Africa was the Ibero-Maurusians, hunter-gatherers who lived in North Africa over 15,000 years ago. Their DNA has been found in remains at Tafralt, Morocco, and shockingly, their genetic makeup was unlike any other ancient population. They carried a mix of West Eurasian and Sub-Saharan African ancestry, proving that contact between Africa, Europe, and the Middle East happened much earlier than we once thought. But the most defining migration of all was the Bantu expansion, one of the largest human migrations in history. Starting around 4,000 years ago, Bantu-speaking peoples began moving from West Africa into Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa, bringing with them agriculture, metalworking, and new languages. Their genetic impact is so significant that today, hundreds of millions of Africans trace their ancestry to these early Bantu migrants. And then, there's the mystery of the Back to Africa migration, a time when Eurasians returned to Africa thousands of years after their ancestors had left. Studies have found that North and East Africans today carry genetic markers that link them to ancient populations from the Middle East and Europe, showing that Africa wasn't just a starting point. It was a constant crossroads of human movement. All of this proves one undeniable truth. Human migration is not just history, it's in our blood. Every twist and turn, every journey across mountains and deserts, is etched into our DNA. And whether your ancestors walked through the Sahara, sailed across the Red Sea, or crossed icy tundras, one thing is certain: Africa was always at the heart of the human story. Close your eyes and picture the vast African savanna 300,000 years ago. Towering grasslands stretch as far as the eye can see. Rivers snake through the landscape, and scattered among the trees are small groups of early humans. They are our ancestors, shaping tools, hunting in coordinated groups, and, most importantly, passing down their DNA. The blueprint of life that connects us all. For decades, the search for human origins led scientists across the world, but the answer was always waiting in Africa. This is where we began. Fossils of early Homo sapiens, like the 300,000-year-old remains found in Jebel Irhoud, Morocco, reveal that modern humans were already evolving far earlier than expected. And the proof isn't just in bones, it's in our genes. Modern genetic studies show that all humans today can trace their ancestry back to a single African population. This was confirmed by the study of mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed only from mother to child, which led to the discovery of mitochondrial Eve, a woman who lived in Africa around 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. While she wasn't the only woman alive at the time, her mitochondrial DNA is the only lineage that survived, passed down through thousands of generations to every single person on Earth today. But it wasn't just mitochondrial Eve. The Y chromosome, passed from fathers to sons, also points to a single African ancestor, Y chromosomal Adam, who lived between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago. These findings prove that our deepest genetic roots are in Africa, no matter where in the world we come from. So how did we go from small groups of early humans in Africa to a species that now dominates the planet? The key was adaptation and migration. As early humans faced changing climates, they moved, spreading across Africa, learning to thrive in deserts, mountains, and forests. This internal migration led to genetic diversity, shaping different populations long before the first humans ever set foot outside the continent. And when those first migrations beyond Africa did happen, between 50,000 and 70,000 years ago, they didn't happen all at once. Small groups left in waves, carrying their African heritage with them to new lands. Some followed coastlines, reaching Asia and Australia, while others took inland routes into Europe and beyond. But even as they spread, their genetic markers always traced back to Africa, the place where the human journey began. What's even more astonishing is that scientists have found traces of ancient ghost populations in African DNA. Early human relatives who no longer exist but left behind genetic footprints in our ancestry. These lost lineages remind us that the story of human evolution is far more complex and fascinating than we ever imagined. Today, when you look in the mirror, you are seeing hundreds of thousands of years of African history written in your DNA. Every cell in your body carries a link to those first ancestors who walked the African plains. No matter where you come from, your story begins in Africa, because Africa is humanity's home. Imagine standing at the edge of the Sahara Desert, feeling the dry wind brush against your skin. Now, picture this same place 10,000 years ago. Not a vast, arid wasteland, but a lush, green paradise filled with lakes, rivers, and abundant wildlife. This was the Green Sahara, a region where ancient humans thrived before one of the greatest environmental shifts in history forced them to adapt or move. As the Sahara dried up, ancient African populations were faced with a choice: stay and change their way of life or migrate in search of new opportunities. This was a defining moment in human history, and it was encoded in our DNA. Genetic evidence shows that during this period, some groups moved north into the Mediterranean region, others traveled east toward the Nile Valley, and some ventured south into the deeper parts of Africa, bringing with them new ideas, technologies, and cultures. This migration wasn't just about survival, it shaped the very fabric of human civilization. Along the Nile, these early settlers laid the foundation for ancient Egypt, one of the most advanced societies of its time. To the west, those who stayed in North Africa developed unique genetic traits that distinguish modern Berbers, Tuaregs, and other indigenous groups. Meanwhile, those who moved deeper into Africa carried their genes to future Bantu-speaking populations, spreading their influence across the continent. But the Sahara wasn't the only barrier shaping Africa's genetic diversity. The Great Rift Valley, a massive geological trench stretching from Ethiopia to Mozambique, acted as both a corridor and a divider. It allowed certain populations to interact and exchange genes, while also isolating others, leading to the formation of distinct ethnic groups with unique genetic markers. Then there's the influence of coastal migration and trade. The Indian Ocean trade network connected East Africa with the Middle East, India, and even China, bringing an influx of new people and genetic diversity. This is why genetic studies show that coastal populations in places like Kenya and Tanzania have traces of ancestry from Arabian and South Asian merchants who sailed these routes thousands of years ago. And let's not forget the powerful impact of mountains and rainforests. The dense jungles of Central Africa served as a natural genetic barrier, isolating certain hunter-gatherer communities like the Pygmies. Similarly, the Ethiopian highlands became a cradle of genetic uniqueness, home to populations that carry markers different from their neighbors due to centuries of relative isolation. Through all these natural barriers, deserts, mountains, rainforests, and coastlines, Africa became a genetic mosaic, a continent of endless diversity. Today, when scientists analyze African DNA, they find an astonishing level of variation, far more than in any other part of the world. This is because Africa is where humanity spent the most time evolving, adapting to different environments and developing into the people we are today. Even as modern borders divide nations, our DNA tells a different story, one of connection, adaptation, and survival against the odds. The landscapes of Africa didn't just shape the continent, they shaped all of us. Imagine a world where survival depends on your ability to adapt. Thousands of years ago, in the heart of Africa, ancient humans faced harsh climates, food shortages, and deadly diseases. But instead of being defeated, they evolved, developing genetic traits that would ensure their survival and, ultimately, shape the destiny of all humankind. One of the most fascinating examples of this is skin color. The intense sun near the equator meant that early Africans developed high melanin levels in their skin, acting as a natural sunscreen to protect against ultraviolet radiation. This wasn't just about avoiding sunburn. Melanin helped prevent deadly conditions like skin cancer and folate deficiency, which could cause birth defects. But as some human groups left Africa and moved to colder, less sunny regions, their bodies adapted again, producing lighter skin to absorb more sunlight and generate vitamin D. Then there's sickle cell disease, a condition often seen as a disadvantage. But did you know that this genetic trait actually helped ancient Africans survive? Malaria was, and still is, one of the deadliest diseases in Africa. The sickle cell gene, despite its harmful effects when inherited from both parents, provided a major survival advantage to those who had just one copy. It made them more resistant to malaria, increasing their chances of survival in mosquito-infested regions. This was natural selection in action. Another incredible genetic adaptation is lactose tolerance. Originally, most humans could only digest milk as babies, but about 7,500 years ago, some African populations, especially in the Sahara and East Africa, developed the ability to digest lactose into adulthood. This wasn't random, it happened at the same time humans began domesticating cattle. Being able to drink milk gave them a vital source of nutrition and hydration, especially in times of drought. This adaptation later spread to parts of Europe, showing just how powerful African genetics have been in shaping global populations. But genetic evolution wasn't just about survival. It also influenced physical endurance. Studies show that certain East African populations, particularly among the Maasai and other Nilotic groups, have longer limbs and slimmer bodies, making them naturally more efficient at releasing heat. This is a key reason why East African runners dominate long-distance races today. Their genetic adaptations, combined with training and cultural traditions, give them an advantage that is nearly impossible to match. And what about resistance to high altitudes? In the Ethiopian highlands, where oxygen levels are lower, local populations developed unique genetic traits to maximize oxygen use and prevent altitude sickness. Similar adaptations are found in the Himalayas and Andes, but genetic evidence suggests that the Ethiopian mutation is older, another sign that Africa has been at the forefront of human evolution for millennia. The most exciting part: these adaptations are still evolving. Scientists have discovered that modern Africans continue to develop new genetic traits in response to diseases, diets, and environments. This means that Africa remains the beating heart of human evolution, shaping not just its own people, but influencing the genetic future of the entire world. Think about this: two people from completely different continents, speaking different languages, practicing different cultures. Yet, deep inside their DNA, they share an ancient connection. It's not just a coincidence, it's a genetic footprint that traces back to the very origins of humanity in Africa. For decades, scientists speculated that all humans must have a common ancestor, but they lacked proof. That changed when genetic studies confirmed what fossil evidence had long suggested: every single human being on Earth today can trace their ancestry back to Africa. This is the foundation of the Out of Africa theory, the idea that modern humans, Homo sapiens, first evolved in Africa around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago before migrating to other parts of the world. One of the biggest breakthroughs in this research came from studying mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA. Unlike regular DNA, which is inherited from both parents, mitochondrial DNA is passed only from mother to child, allowing scientists to track direct maternal ancestry. When researchers examined mtDNA from people around the world, they found that all humans could be traced back to a single woman who lived in Africa roughly 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. She is often called Mitochondrial Eve, not because she was the only woman alive at the time, but because all humans today descend from her maternal lineage. But there's more. Scientists also studied the Y chromosome, which is passed from father to son. Just like with Mitochondrial Eve, they discovered a common male ancestor, often referred to as Y-chromosomal Adam, who lived in Africa around the same time. This confirmed that not only did our species originate in Africa, but that all men today share a direct paternal lineage from the continent. Now, you might be wondering, if all humans came from Africa, why do we look so different today? The answer lies in migration, adaptation, and time. Around 60,000 to 80,000 years ago, small groups of early humans left Africa, likely following food sources and changing climates. As they spread into Europe, Asia, and beyond, they gradually adapted to their new environments. Skin color lightened in colder, less sunny regions to allow for better vitamin D absorption. Eye shapes changed to protect against cold winds or intense sunlight. Even body structures evolved based on climate: taller, leaner bodies in hot regions, shorter, stockier builds in colder ones. But despite these external differences, the truth is undeniable. Our genetic similarities far outweigh our differences. In fact, studies show that humans share 99.9% of their DNA with one another, meaning that the concept of race is biologically insignificant. The genetic variations that determine things like skin color, hair type, or facial features are just tiny adaptations that occurred relatively recently in human history. The deeper you go into our DNA, the clearer it becomes. We are all African beneath the surface. Even today, the genetic diversity found within Africa is greater than that of the rest of the world combined. This means that two people from different parts of Africa can be more genetically distinct from each other than a European and an Asian. This is because, while some groups left Africa, many others stayed behind, evolving separately for tens of thousands of years. Africa isn't just the birthplace of humanity. It's also the place where the greatest human genetic diversity exists today. And here's something even more mind-blowing. The Out of Africa migration wasn't a one-way journey. Genetic evidence shows that humans didn't just leave Africa and never return. There were multiple back migrations where early humans moved back into Africa, bringing new genetic traits and influencing populations. This means that the story of human evolution isn't a straight line. It's a complex, interconnected web of movement and adaptation that always leads back to Africa. So the next time you look in the mirror, remember, your DNA carries the story of an ancient journey, one that started in Africa and continues to shape who you are today. Imagine if you could take a DNA test and unlock the hidden stories of your ancestors, stories not just from centuries ago, but from tens of thousands of years in the past. What if your genes held evidence of epic migrations, lost civilizations, and even encounters with ancient human species that no longer exist? For most of human history, we believed that Homo sapiens, the species we all belong to, was the only intelligent human species to have ever lived. But groundbreaking DNA research has revealed something extraordinary. We were not alone. Our ancestors once shared the earth with other human-like species, and in some cases, they even interbred with them, leaving traces of those ancient encounters within our very own DNA. Take the Neanderthals, for example. These early humans lived in Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years before going extinct around 40,000 years ago. But they didn't just vanish without a trace. When scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome, they found something astonishing. Most non-African people today carry around 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. This means that when early Homo sapiens left Africa and encountered Neanderthals in Europe and Asia, they didn't just compete with them, they also interbred. But that's not all. In 2008, researchers made another shocking discovery in a cave in Siberia, a finger bone from an entirely unknown group of ancient humans. This group, named the Denisovans, were distant cousins of Neanderthals, and like them, they also mixed with early Homo sapiens. Today, many people from East Asia, Australia, and the Pacific Islands carry small amounts of Denisovan DNA, including genetic adaptations that help people survive at high altitudes, like those seen in the Tibetan population. But here's where it gets even more interesting. While Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA is found in many modern humans, the same isn't true for most native African populations. Why? Because Neanderthals and Denisovans never lived in Africa. These ancient interbreeding events only happened after humans migrated out of Africa and encountered them. However, recent studies suggest that even African populations carry traces of ancient human DNA, but from a completely different, unknown human species. Some scientists believe there may have been ghost lineages, groups of archaic humans that we have never found fossils of but whose genetic fingerprints still exist in the DNA of modern Africans. This means that the story of our evolution is even more complex than we ever imagined. So, what does all of this tell us? It reveals that Homo sapiens were not an isolated species. We were part of a much larger, interconnected web of ancient humans. And while our species ultimately survived while others went extinct, those other groups live on within us, in our genes, influencing everything from our immune systems to our ability to thrive in different environments. The DNA we carry today is not just a record of our immediate ancestors, it is a time capsule, holding the echoes of species that once walked the earth but disappeared long ago. In a way, these ancient humans never truly vanished. They are still here, inside us, written in our DNA. Picture this, a time when humans weren't the only intelligent species walking the earth. A time when our ancestors lived alongside, and even interbred with, other ancient humans. But here's the twist. Those ancient interactions didn't just shape our history. They shaped us, too. For centuries, scientists debated what happened to the Neanderthals and other early human species. Did Homo sapiens wipe them out? Did they simply go extinct? The truth, revealed through DNA, is far more fascinating and unexpected. They are still with us, inside our very cells. Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives, lived in Europe and Asia for over 400,000 years before vanishing around 40,000 years ago. For a long time, it was thought they disappeared without a trace. But then, in 2010, scientists sequenced their DNA and made a groundbreaking discovery. Every non-African human today carries between 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. This means that when early humans migrated out of Africa, they didn't just replace Neanderthals. They interacted with them, lived among them, and even had children together. And they weren't the only ones. Deep in a Siberian cave, scientists unearthed something completely unexpected. The remains of an entirely unknown group of ancient humans. These mysterious people, known as Denisovans, were distant cousins of Neanderthals. Like their European relatives, they, too, mixed with early Homo sapiens. Today, traces of Denisovan DNA are found in modern populations from East Asia, Papua New Guinea, and indigenous Australians, providing crucial genetic advantages, like the ability to survive at extreme altitudes, which is still found in the Tibetan people today. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. While Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA is found in many populations outside Africa, scientists have recently discovered evidence of another, unknown ancient human species that mixed with our ancestors, but only in Africa. Some researchers call this a ghost lineage, a species we have no fossils of, yet its genetic fingerprints still exist in modern African populations. This suggests that Africa, the birthplace of Homo sapiens, wasn't just home to our species, but to other now extinct humans that contributed to our DNA in ways we are only beginning to understand. So, what does this all mean for us today? It means that we are not just Homo sapiens, we are a genetic mosaic, carrying fragments of multiple ancient human species. The immune systems that protect us, the way our bodies adapt to different environments, even certain traits we see in ourselves, all of these could be influenced by genes inherited from human relatives who lived tens of thousands of years ago. In a way, those other humans never truly disappeared. Their DNA lives on within us, shaping who we are, how we survive, and how we continue to evolve. Imagine a world where the land beneath your feet was once home to people who vanished without a trace. No written records, no grand monuments, just fragments of DNA, buried deep within us, holding the only clues to their existence. This is the case for some of Africa's most mysterious lost civilizations, civilizations that thrived, traded, and even shaped the genetics of modern Africans, yet were nearly forgotten by history. Take the Canaan-Bornu Empire, a powerful civilization that spanned parts of modern-day Chad, Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger, and Libya. It lasted for over 1,000 years, controlling vast trade routes across the Sahara. But its most fascinating legacy isn't just in history books. It's in the DNA of the Kanuri and Kitoko people of Cameroon. Genetic studies show that these groups are descended from a mix of three ancient populations, one from coastal West Africa, one from East Africa, and one from North Africa and the Levant. This suggests that centuries before European explorers ever set foot in Africa, ancient migrations were already bringing diverse people together, shaping the very identity of the region. But the genetic fingerprints of lost civilizations don't stop there. The once mighty kingdom of Makuria, which ruled over what is now Sudan, also left a mark in unexpected ways. For nearly 700 years, it maintained a peace treaty with the expanding Arab forces from Egypt. But when that treaty collapsed, genetic mixing began. DNA analysis reveals that modern Sudanese populations show distinct genetic traces of this ancient period, with clear evidence of Arab and Nubian ancestry interwoven after the fall of Makuria. This means that even though the kingdom itself disappeared, its people, and their genetic legacy, did not. And then there's the Aksumite Empire, one of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world, which linked Africa to the Middle East and even Asia through trade. At its peak, Aksum controlled territories in modern-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, and Yemen. It was considered one of the four great world powers of its time, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. But here's the incredible part. DNA evidence suggests that even before the rise of Aksum, early migrations from the Arabian Peninsula had already begun shaping the genetic landscape of Northeast Africa. People from the ancient lands of Arabia sailed across the Red Sea, settling in the Horn of Africa and intermixing with local populations. Today, the genes of these early migrants can still be found in Ethiopian and Eritrean populations, offering a direct link to one of Africa's greatest lost civilizations. But perhaps the most significant migration in African history wasn't the result of an empire. It was the Bantu expansion. Around 4,000 years ago, a group of people speaking Bantu languages left what is now Cameroon and began spreading across the continent. Within just 2,000 years, they had migrated over 4,000 kilometers, reaching as far as South Africa. Their movement reshaped the genetics of nearly a quarter of all Africans today. But here's something even more fascinating. While the Bantu migration spread rapidly to the east and south, DNA evidence shows that they also moved westward, something that was previously overlooked. This means that African history isn't just about external influences, it's about powerful, internal migrations that shaped the continent in ways we are only beginning to understand. So, why does this matter? Because history isn't just written in books, it's written in our very DNA. Every strand of African genetics tells a story of kingdoms that rose and fell, of trade routes that connected distant lands, of cultures that mixed and evolved. The civilizations may have disappeared, but their people never truly vanished. Their bloodlines live on, whispering their secrets through the genes of millions today. Buried beneath layers of time, hidden in the very fabric of our DNA, lies the final chapter of this incredible story, the future of African genetics. We have traced the deep past, uncovered lost civilizations, and mapped ancient migrations. But what does all of this mean for modern science, medicine, and identity? Today, cutting-edge genetic research is unlocking new possibilities, not just in history but in health. African genomes hold the highest level of genetic diversity on Earth, and yet, until recently, they were the most underrepresented in genetic studies. This is changing. Scientists are now using African DNA to fight diseases, uncovering genetic markers that could lead to breakthroughs in treating conditions like sickle cell anemia, malaria resistance, and even cancer. For example, researchers have found that some Africans carry a gene that makes them naturally resistant to certain forms of malaria, a discovery that could help develop better treatments and vaccines for millions of people worldwide. But beyond medicine, African genetics is also reshaping our understanding of human identity. With more people taking DNA tests than ever before, African descendants across the world are reconnecting with their roots in ways never thought possible. An African American tracing their ancestry to a specific region in Ghana, a Caribbean family discovering their links to Nigeria, a South American community realizing their heritage traces back to Angola. DNA has become a bridge, reconnecting the past to the present, and helping millions rediscover their ancestral stories. And then there's the future of evolution itself. By studying African genetics, scientists are getting closer to answering fundamental questions. Why did Homo sapiens become the dominant human species? What genes helped our ancestors survive and adapt? Could Africa still hold the key to the future of human evolution? One thing is certain, Africa is not just the past. It is the future. The secrets hidden in African DNA are not just rewriting history. They are shaping medicine, technology, and the very way we see ourselves as humans. The journey that began hundreds of thousands of years ago in Africa is far from over. In many ways, it is only just beginning.